Welcome to our Emmy Contenders production design panel. We're here today with Nora Mendis from Couples Therapy, Leigh from Godfather of Harlem, Howard Cummings from Westworld, and Misty Buckley from The Little Mermaid Live. So we'll start with a simple one. What do you love most about being a production designer? Misty, let's go to you.
I think it's, for me, I mostly work in music, and it's about taking people's words, their albums, or their stories, and creating an environment for them to perform those stories, and in a way that makes them feel like the best version of themselves. So I think it's how people feel. It's making people feel a certain way, for me, that is it is what gives me the buzz of being a production designer, and being able to create that space and that environment, and hopefully give the audience something that makes them feel something as well. So it's quite a visceral sort of experience, is what excites me about it.
For me, I mean, I just love, doing all the research and building a world from scratch. It's like, it's really just fun. You just have so much impact on the way you experience the world through the objects that are in a space. And, I always joke that the best movie would not have any actors in it. It would just be a bunch of rooms. And because that's all I'm ever looking at. And, so it's just fun to see how it is, a costume, but in objects. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I look at it very much the way, probably maybe a painter thinks about a painting or a canvas, that there's this, palette of color which is put on a canvas and arranged and mixed in a certain way to create something that's never existed before, that has content. And, I sort of feel like objects, pretty much, what was just said, of objects and textures, and to create environments, we can rearrange the real world to infuse a film frame with something which supports what the actors are doing.
Yeah, I'm sort of a combination of Nora and Misty, where it's sort of world building and storytelling are really things that engage me. And I just, thank God, this job includes messy people like the actors as well, and producers and everybody else, because I don't know, it's sort of just like all of that kind of like, what I hope in my design is that I get to learn something every time. And, when you do the research and stuff, certainly that is really fun, because you learn I know so much random stuff that it's crazy about, all sorts of, I don't know, how fishermen store fish, and things like that, or unfortunately things like mortuaries and prisons and all that stuff. And that part, every day you don't get jobs like that in the real world, that you just are constantly learning. So for me, the thing about that I love the most about it is sort of the learning of it all. And so that's something I just naturally, it's just engaging and exciting.
All that trivia is going to come in handy one day, so just you wait.
Oh God, yeah, I'm pretty good at trivia night, but my memory is maybe not what it was. No, I'm just kidding. So, anyhow.
Well, how do you guys get started with a design? Do you like to hand draw, or do you like to do it digitally? And now we have, like VR in production design. So have any of you used that either? Dan, let's go to you.
I don't have one set way of starting. It kind of depends on the project. One kind of project may force you to go look at a location, or go find a location first. Another kind of project may make you sit at the table and hand draw something. Another kind of project may make you bring in the model makers, but it completely depends on the type of project that you are starting.
I totally agree. That's like, I feel like for me, it's each show tells you what it wants. It's
Yes.
sort of like, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's kind of the painful part. But for instance, I did a show called Nick with Steven Soderbergh, and it was a TV series, Victorian thing. And and in that case, at the very first location I drove up to, I got out of the car and I looked at the location manager and I went, oh God, this is it. So somehow we have to convince this high school with 4 schools in it that we're going to use it for our hospital. And then I had a clear snap vision of like, I know what the show looks like. And then I had to tell the producers, it's really big and you guys have no idea how big it is. And it's just, but sometimes shows tell you what they want.
Yeah.
And hopefully, you know, you can connect. Maybe it doesn't happen in the very beginning like that. Maybe it happens later on the line, but that moment of connection is really just you pray for those moments.
Yeah, there's really no specific way that I get started, and it just depends on the project and it depends on the directors, and yeah, it can go a million ways, which is great.
I think I always start with drawing or a painting because I suppose I work less on location and more like I'm given a venue, or so it'll be like it's a stadium or it's a run of theatre shows, or so there's always a space that I need to kind of build a composition around. And so, you know, and it's quite uninspiring sometimes just walking into like a stadium and going, wow, I see it, you know. So I always have to start with, I suppose, research and drawing at the same time, especially if it's coming from an album or something, and the album's all about, you know, I don't know, I can't think of anything right now, you know, like it's all about space or something, then I'll go deep into that. But drawing is just a natural, she says with a pencil in her hand,
Yeah.
but it's just like it's a natural impulse. So that's how I have to start. Even if it's an appalling drawing, I just have to get that, you know, connection, and then everything sort of flows from there. But yeah.
Well, you guys, like, you establish the world of the show or whatever project you're working on. So how do you balance, you know, creating something that is striking but also doesn't pull away from the focus of like the scene at hand when it's happening? Nora, let's start with you.
I mean, in the case of Couples, it really was important that things feel natural, and that it was a familiar environment, not super designy per se, you know. But again, it totally depends on the show or, you know, the movie. And it's like sometimes you really just want to push it super hard, and you know, and something like Westworld, where the idea is all like the design is so in line with the narrative. It's like it's not meant to be naturalistic exactly, and you know. But for something like Couples, it's like you just want it to feel real and feel familiar, and like feel dirty and cluttered and like, you know, and just like it's not a set on a stage. And but you know, I just finished a show called Betty that's on HBO, which is like, you know, a version of young people in New York City that is real, but also like pushed a little bit. And so it's like everything is a little crazier, everything's a little more colorful, like everything is a little like either like more trust fund or more dirty or more whatever, and that can be fun too, you know.
I think on Godfather of Harlem, it was kind of a mixed bag with this one, because most of the time I certainly would not want the sets to take over, but Chris Brancato, our showrunner, would tell me instances where he wanted a very big statement. For instance, there's a scene inside a mosque with a very large sort of statement, very high up on a wall, that the statement was an important theme for the show, but certainly in a mosque that would not have been there, and he was going for a moment, you know. Or there's a moment in with gangsters going into a kind of gruesome meat locker, meat packing plant, where it's just rows of sides of beef hanging. And again, this was one of these moments that he requested specifically. So it kind of depended, and it wasn't like there were one or two of these every episode, but every now and then he would say, I want this to be a certain way. And we would hit hard with a scenic moment.
Well, I think that it's a good question because, like Nora said, it varies for shows. I mean, I'm sure for Misty, it's a whole, she's creating everything, you know. And then for me, you know, I got to work with Steven Soderbergh for pretty much 10 years straight. And what I liked about that was every project had a different approach. It was a different exercise. He never repeats stuff. So each thing had its own thing. So sometimes my job was to stay out of the way. If Steven could just have a camera and two other people, he'd be happy, and actors. You know, and there's sometimes where it's, well, you know, because he did movies on iPhones. I didn't do the iPhone movies. I just stayed out of that one. I really stayed out of the way. But then there are other movies that I did with him that was like Liberace, and it was like, it was, he came to me and said, this over the top crazy ass guy, it was all about show. And he said, this is what the storytelling is driven by this. And so, like, for instance, we're on the set and he, you know, he's very impatient because he always wants stuff to happen right away, which is great. It's like when you're on set, you're super focused. We have no director's chairs. Nobody sits down. There's no video village. It is just all him and the camera. And so the decorator, Barbara Munt, she got these little figurines of pianos and things and just put them in this crazy ass case. And Steven started pulling them out and just started shooting each one of them in between setups, because he just like saw this thing and he just went, and that's sort of the opening credit sequence of the show. And it's just like, so for him, it just varied. So it made me as a designer have to sort of rethink my approach to every job. It couldn't be the same. But as I said before, that's something I really like. I like being set off kilter, you know, because you have to react. And I said, having that reactive quality, and like, for instance, watching him work with actors, he's very reactive. He doesn't tell them exactly what to do. He watches what they do, you know, but then he expects you to take it and make it your own somehow. So that was a great experience. And that's probably the best kind of way to work. And hopefully you try to repeat that as much as you can.
It depends, you know, like everybody, we have to respond to a different brief every time, and that's part of what we love and keeps us, you know, reinventing. And I think it's the difference between, sometimes I might be designing a field or you know, for a festival or a huge backdrop for a stadium, and then you want the scale. But sometimes, you know, with Little Mermaid, there were moments of real tenderness and real intimacy and real, you know, magic, where you don't want to be overwhelming and you don't want to have too much of a presence, and you really, it's about that moment, that song and the words, but there's a little sparkle in the background or something which just enhances that moment, that kind of dreamy, whimsical world, for instance, in Part of Your World, where she's singing with all the objects around. We really didn't want them to be overpowering, but we wanted to tell the story that these were her collections and these were her treasures, and this was her, this was her passion. So it's just finding that balance, and that's what I guess all of us are doing, is finding that kind of beautiful sweet spot where you're enhancing the story, but you're not saying, look at my amazing set, if you could just leave now because we could focus on this. So it's that balance, which I think is really what we all live for, isn't it? Getting that moment.
All right, guys. Well, it was great speaking with all of you. Thank you so much for your time. Stay safe, wear your masks, and maybe we could do this in person one day.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.